crowded market, right? When you talk about it. So, it means that there are already players in the market, that you are in. It could be multiple players, or it could even just be 2 or 3. The same principles follow. It means that the category already exists. You're not creating a new category. And it also means that some of these players might have been there for multiple years, would have a very good presence in the market share. And most of your problems are not about, did I find product market fit? But rather it's about, am I able to give them something which no other product is giving? Right? Can I give them a differentiated value? And how do I get their attention to tell them what I'm doing in a meaningful way, which adds value to them and also resonates with what they want to do, right? So that's what I'm saying when I'm saying a crowded market. So now that sounds a bit daunting, because it's like, what the hell are you going to do? Because there's already so many players, it's so saturated. So what can you do to differentiate yourself or penetrate that slowly, right? It's not a one-day process. It's going to happen over months and over doing a bunch of different things, and that's what we're going to look at, right? So I know it sounds daunting, but it does have its own advantages, right? The first thing is, it's great. You are in a crowded market, which means that there is tremendous value in that market. People want those products, and people want them so much that multiple players are coming into the market and still doing things there, right? So you are in a place where there is tremendous opportunity, and doing the right things, you can penetrate it well and come out as one of the winners. The second part is that you're not starting on a blank slate. It's not that you have no clue about who the customers are, or how you pitch to them and what they want. You can learn from the market. It's right there. So there's a big learning field over there. The third one I want to talk about is in terms of you can learn from their mistakes, right? Of course, people talk about second mover advantage, but the same thing is for third and fourth, especially in SaaS, when there are so many new technologies coming, in terms of there's so many ways that you can be better than older players in terms of technology, in terms of user experience, in terms of how you're thinking about that problem. So, you always have advantages to learn from people who've already done it before. Obviously, like a big example I want to talk about, though it's not in SaaS, is if you look at Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster was the king of DVDs, right? In the 1990s, late 1990s, when Netflix came in, they didn't change the product, they didn't change the market, they just changed the business model. They were still targeting the same customers, they're still selling DVDs, but they just did it by mail-in, right? And that was a huge win for someone who's coming in, because they saw the market differently with a different lens, and they were able to come in and take advantage of something that Blockbuster was not doing well. And if you fast forward, obviously, though Blockbuster tried to overcome and even attempted to go after Netflix in the same model, because of a lot of different reasons, they weren't able to win, and Netflix came out as a winner. So just by looking at all of these things that we're going to talk about, you can look at how you can penetrate and actually come out the other way as one of the winners, right? Another thing I want to kind of talk about before we get in is, when you look at B2B SaaS, right, it's not a winner-takes-all market, right? It's not like a social network where network effects are there. So there is room for more players. Very good example of that is look at Freshdesk. They came after Zendesk to the market, and they were still able to win. And today, both Zendesk and Freshdesk are great products out in the market, doing really, really well. And there are many more customer support softwares. There's Front, there's Groove, there's Hiver, there's a bunch of different players looking at it with slightly different lenses, doing slightly different things, slightly different target audiences. So they're doing that well. And so there is a place, right? There's one thing that I remember, Girish Machbodhan from Freshdesk, he used to always tell us, when you go to buy a TV, you're not just going to go and pick up one and come back, right? You don't have that clarity. You're going to look at an LG, a Samsung, a Sony, and then you're going to see what is the best for you at that point. So you do that evaluation among some of the top players there. So your goal as a SaaS product, which is coming in, is to ensure that you are in that consideration set amongst those top players, right? 1, 2, and then once you're in that consideration set, how do you convince the customer that you bring the most value to them if it's the target audience that you are talking to, right? So those are the two things that you have to be focusing on. And everything else I'm going to talk about throughout this talk will ensure that one of these two things are helped and can strengthen both of these areas to actually help you penetrate into that market. Okay? So the 5 areas I want to talk about today, the 5 areas, it's broad, obviously, but that's one of the lessons I want you to take away from here, right? It's not a silver bullet. It's not a golden ticket. There are areas, all areas that you need to be working in parallel to kind of converge into this, right? Just like how a product can't get built without engineering or without design or without some sort of idea of what you want to build, you need all of that. So all of these things need to come together, and you have to be thinking about that. That's how you can actually look at how to make a successful product here. So the things I'm going to talk about are knowing your products, finding your gap, using price to your advantage, wow them and lock them in, and then building a brand, right? So as I go through these, we'll also see how they all tie into each other and how one can lead to the other, and sort of cyclical, right? It's not a step-by-step 5 discrete processes. They all have to happen in parallel and inform one another, and that's what we'll be talking about. So the first part is knowing your product, right? And I can't stress enough about this, and I'll say this simply because people sometimes think that, oh, you know what, I think this is this is something that is underserved here, and let me just go start building a product there, right? Especially when you know it's, and even if you're not sure whether it's a crowded market or not, this is going to be a great exercise for you, because it's going to test your hypothesis. It's going to validate amongst multiple users. It's going to really see what's in the market and not just what you saw in, a glimpse. So that's what it's going to do. So I can't stress enough on how you have to invest in a detailed analysis of all the products. Every time I move into start working on a new product in Freshworks, whether it's already existing or it's a new product I'm starting out, I spend the first few weeks or a month just looking at the market, the different products that are there, and every piece of it, right? From onboarding to what the self-service capabilities are, how I set up the user experience, and then I try to use different parts of the product, because you never know where you find something interesting. Either it could be something which has deep pain points, or it could be something that they've done really well. Those are all things that are useful for you to understand, because you need to know your competition, right? So put it all in a big Excel sheet or whatever works for you, ensure it's accessible to every team member, every PM, engineer, a developer, a designer, so everyone knows what they're up against, right? And you can keep adding to this. It's not just a one-time activity. You can keep doing this every few months, or every time a new competitor comes into the market, or whatever works for you, right? The second part is that it's not just about the product itself, because that's your experience of the product. Now scrutinize all the reviews you can find, G2 Crowd, Captera, whatever else reviews you can find, just tweets, anything that you can see in the market, right? Because that will give you an understanding of what customers like, what they don't like, why they would recommend a product, why they will not, how they got interested in the product. Now it's going to give you so much of a wealth of information on customer motivations over here. So that's also a great piece of, big pieces of information that you can keep in your corner. Okay? If possible, talk to your competitors' customers, because nothing beats having a one-on-one conversation and really digging through the motivations of a customer and what value they see. But whenever possible, do this. Now, this whole thing is your arsenal, right? And it's not just for you to keep aside, but it can actually inform your roadmap and strategy. Because especially even if you're a new product, or you're finished your MVP and then you're figuring out what to do next, all of these areas that you kind of dig in, it's going to show you what areas that you just cannot ignore. It's going to show you what areas that nobody else is doing, which means those are open areas for you if that's something that you want to go after. You will also see what are the areas that you can do better, because you have not just done a checklist of features, you've actually gone and analyzed their products. So you'll actually be able to say, I can do this process better, that process better. So it's going to inform your roadmap and strategy, right? And that's really, really powerful. An example I want to give is at Fresh Caller, when we started the product, it's a cloud telephony product. And when we started looking at the market, there were so many, I mean, it's not 10s, 20, I mean, plus whatever products in the market, all doing similar things. But once we started digging in, we saw some of it are for local markets, some of them are for global, but then they don't do certain things. No, we were able to dig through and see all of that. But on the surface, everything, looked the same. It looked like everybody was doing everything. So as we dug through, what we saw, especially for the segment we wanted, which was the SMB segment, we saw that customers, the competitors were not really building flexible, powerful routing engines. So from a customer support point of view, you want to ensure and figure out how you route your calls to different people, right? And that was something weak in the SMB segment, the lower end of the SMB. There were players which were more upmarket, enterprise, and more expensive that did invest in it. But that was great information for us. And from the day one, we built a strong routing engine. We had a big base for it, and that was a key feature that helped us get some of our initial customers. So this process becomes very, very important, and it will inform your roadmap, right? So the next thing I want is finding your gap. So you have, you figured out your small features, you figured out what is happening, what are the things that you can do differently. But when you take a step back, what is it, and all of this will help when your customers start using your products, but what is it that you can say to your customer to kind of convince them that you are doing something different and you are doing something which will be more useful to them than anybody else, right? So again, this comes back to looking at what everybody else is doing in the market, understanding your competitive positioning. So look at the websites, taglines, keywords, what customers feel about different competitors, right? What do they think they stand for? And look at all of that, right? You can literally draw out a map of different parts where each competitor is strong at. And find a gap that aligns with your store. You would have started this product with a thought saying, hey, this sucks in this other product, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. So A, you can see if it aligns. B, you will also see if it doesn't align, then have you been off the mark? You can reconfigure yourself, and that's very key. So you find an authentic place where there is a gap and it fits into what you want to build, and that's going to really, really help you, because if it's a crowded market, everybody's saying many of the same things. So what is that one thing you say differently, and how can you kind of double down, triple down on that, right? Again, an example I want to say is in the early days of Freshdesk, though we saw that there were a lot of small things people wanted, which other customer support softwares did not do. What we saw was no one was tackling social support as part of a help desk, right? And from Girish's own experience, he saw that that was something that is important and a upcoming trend. So we wanted to take that positioning in the market. And like I said, and that really worked for us. And on top of that, you have to invest to strengthen that in your roadmap. You might not have it in the beginning, but you have to keep at it to ensure that area gets strengthened. So we built social ticketing, we built, Twitter, Facebook integration, which no one else had at that point. Apart from doing all the other things we wanted to do, this is also something you invest in. So again, your roadmap is aligned to what you're talking about, right? So it's not just you use this positioning for marketing collateral and website, but you also bring it back into the roadmap. And that's how you kind of deliberately, start digging a hole so that you can get into that market. It's a slow and steady process. So before we jump on to the other things, I wanted to reiterate what we talked about, right? This is a quote I came across by David Cummings, who's the founder of Pardot. Again, marketing automation software is pretty crowded. And this is what he said. He said, markets aren't one they appear on the outside. On the outside, it looks like there are 10 different competitors, all doing the same thing, speaking the same language, and targeting the same group of businesses. In reality, each competitor has their own strengths and weaknesses and targets a slightly different segment of the market. Now, it helps you figure out what that is and tell customers directly so it's clear to them. You don't lose them in a funnel, you don't confuse them. If you recognize what these things are and tell them proactively, this is how I'm different, this is what I do, then that's what's going to help you get a winning product, right? Because the differences will anyway be there. It's just about whether it's deliberate and helpful to your growth, or it was accidental, which means that you're not leveraging it, right? So that's what you have to sort of look at. The third piece I want to talk about is pricing, using pricing to your advantage. Of course, going low on pricing is a great technique, is a great way to enter the market and capture the market and wow customers in. We've seen that a lot in B2C, and of course with SaaS and their higher gross margins, it's something that you can really leverage. But what I would also say is don't go too low on the price, especially when the rest of the products in the market which are targeting the same customer segment are much higher, because then customers are going to think your value is also that much lower, right? If you're actually in fact targeting a completely different segment and that's your differentiation, then great. Price is obviously where you very clearly show that positioning, but just be careful about how you go about it. The other thing I also want to say is that it's not going lower than the market is not the only thing that you can do. There are areas where when the market is already very low, but you have a very clear differentiation, a very clear positioning, which customers are convinced that add much more value to them, you can actually go higher than the market. Right? Intercom is a great example of that. They were very, very late to the live chat market. I mean, live chat has been there for years and years, but they had a very strong positioning. They were having a different take of conversational marketing and support, a very, very strong brand. So they priced themselves at a premium, but they're still entering the live chat market and they're doing amazingly well today, right? So it depends on how it aligns with that positioning and the gap that you find and the segments that you want to go after. You can also price higher. The third part I want to kind of reinforce is for pricing itself. It's not all about just going low or going high. Use that competitor analysis that you have made to figure out what you want in your pricing, because you have your segments and then you see your competitor analysis of where everyone is weak, and you do this across the board. So for Freshcaller, for example, we saw that and we wanted a broad-ish segment, right, SMBs. When we saw this, the smaller side of the SMBs, there were multiple products, but they were very, very low on features and capabilities. They just barely did what a telephony software should do, right? And on the other extreme, we had very highly priced telephony products, and that were obviously had many, many features that we didn't even have and were priced high. So what we did was, for that lower segment, we didn't go lower than them. We were at the same price, but we gave them more capabilities at that same price. So that became something that we could win against them with. And at the higher segment, we priced lower because we could price lower. And we were still able to say that, hey, we are an affordable solution with all our complex, AI and machine learning and, routing and all of those things. So at both ends of the spectrum, we kind of manipulated pricing based on the things we learned from our positioning and our competitor analysis. So look at pricing as a holistic thing, not just about undercutting the market and, going after the other players. And then it can be really powerful for you. The next piece I wanted to talk about was wowing them and locking them in, right? So, of course, now people say it's table stakes to sort of, have amazing products. But I still want to talk about this, because there are a few different things here. The power of, product-led growth that you get, and from that virality that you get, can be amazing. Right? And that wow experience, and it's not just about user experience, it is giving them those delightful moments. It can either be in terms of content or emojis like what Slack does, but it can also be in terms of really using better technology to delight customers, right? Like what Zoom does. It's about the fact that it's so much faster and better, and they have knocked on some of those technical things that we had to do before getting into that experience. And this becomes really important because we've seen in the market, right? Profitwell put out a study where CAC, customer acquisition costs, have increased by 55% in the past 5 years. And that's a lot. And customers are also want to pay 30% lesser for products because they know more and more SaaS products are coming. So when you have something like that, any virality you can get from product is something that's going to help you. So that's something that you need to do. The other thing I want to say is that you have to instill the customer centricity across product, right? It's not about an experience here, but at every touch point. when you're looking at how your onboarding emails go, what is the experience with the salesperson, what is the experience with the customer support rep, and how do you kind of help them through that process. Everything needs to have an amazing experience, and it should be laser focused on the customer. When you remember Blockbuster, it was not that their products were bad, but they priced you for late fees, and that was not customer centric, right? That was the beginning of why Netflix came about. So when you leave room in customer centricity, then that's where other players are going to come. And again, with the incumbent players in the market, customer centricity is what you can sort of drive to get people into you. The third, and this is very important, especially for newer products that are upcoming, is that as you're building something very fast, you're trying to keep up with the market, you're trying to add all the things that are very, very key in the market, and you're trying to get more and more customers. There could be a time where some things go through the cracks, and that's not good for you. That can be very dangerous, because no matter what you do to bring them in, if you're losing them fast, then that's not really, you think you're penetrating, but you're not really penetrating the market, right? Because not only that you also lose the goodwill of the customer, and not just all the wasted effort. Again, an example from my most recent product, Fresh Collar, was after a year of the product, or year and a half, we saw that like churn had started slowly increasing. So we actually sort of stepped back, just focused on what all the things that are leading to churn, dug through all of those customers and talked to them, and started chipping away at all of those things and clearing them out. We did this for like a couple of months, and in the next quarter, our churn reduced by 60%, and that really like brought our growth back into track, right? So it's a huge, because otherwise you're putting all this effort on growth and you see that it's not moving because of that churn. So just keep a eye out for it. Keep reviewing, whether you can reduce it, or if you see it going too high, you need to figure out how to sort of, bring that back in. So last, definitely not the least, is building a powerful brand, right? So we talked about two things. One is, how do you get into those top 4 pieces or top 3 or 4 customers that, competitors that customers actually validate? And then how do you kind of convince them you have that value proposition? So all of the things I talked about till now sort of add to it, and building the brand could probably be one of the biggest pieces to kind of put you in that consideration set, right? Because I'm not talking about marketing as such, because your lead generation and acquisition model could be through paid lead gen, it could be through organic, it could be through outbound sales, it could be through any other sort of marketing partnerships. All of that is there, and that could completely differ based on the segment and the product and the channel that actually is working for you. But beyond all that, you have to kind of look at content and community that goes beyond marketing, right? Looking at it as something that you can invest, or your customers can invest in and look at and learn from. What is it that you're going to give them, even if they're not using your product, or even if they have not started using your product, right? So what is it that you can give them, and this again should align with your positioning too. The holistic brand that you're building, your positioning is one part of it, but everything else you do is also a part of it. Every action every employee does when it's customer facing, and not even just customer facing, right? How you set up the company. All of these things add to your brand. And I'm not saying whether it's a good brand or bad brand. If you do something different, it dilutes that brand. So everything you do, have a playbook and do it deliberately and say, this is what our brand stands for. As people, as community, as content, as product, this is what we're going to do, and keep reinforcing it. So Drift and Intercom are great examples. Both of them live chat products. They sort of built this amazing brand that you don't even talk about the live chat products that were there before, both of them came in. So that's an amazing story of how they built the brand, and the brand leverages what customers come in and what they offer to them. And again, this is going to be key to kind of keep your CAC in a sustainable way and grow your product. So I'm just going to do a quick recap. I think we're sort of running out of time. I'll just have a couple of minutes. So quick recap of ensure you know your products. Every little bit of how the product works for your competitors, you need to know, and find that gap in that positioning where you can really talk about this is how you differentiate and this is what you can do in the market, and use that price to your advantage based on what you find out from the products and the positioning. Keep both in mind and use pricing to your advantage to leverage those two. And no matter what, wow your customers, try to bring delight wherever you can. And this is an iterative process. It's not going to happen instantly, but focus on it and see where you can lock them in by cutting churn, by giving them an amazing experience throughout with every part of your company and product and the product itself. And lastly, building a brand which is authentic, which gives the customers what they're looking for, adds value to them, irrespective of whether the product exists. Even if your product does not exist, the brand should still stand for the same thing. That's how you have to look at it. So kind of build a holistic brand like that to ensure that you're not to bring your customer acquisition costs lower, and to overall keep reinforcing and keeping your product in those two, three, four competitors that your customers are evaluating. So I also want to add this, that it's not just about penetrating and then doing well and then you're good to go, right? We talked about Netflix and Blockbuster in the beginning, but fast forward so many years, Blockbuster's not there. Netflix has moved on to streaming, but it's not like it is doing really well. But there are so many OTT players coming. There's Amazon Prime, there's Disney, and I feel like in India there's like an OTT coming up every other week, right? So there is more and more competition in a new context, in the way the market has evolved in new technology. So it'll always come. So it's only one segment of the race which is over, and you have to keep evaluating along these 5 areas over and over again to see how you kind of sustain the next part of the race, or how you have to win in that part of the race. So it's a continuous process, and you have to keep at it. There are 2 things you can do. One is always keep a look out for the new entrants in the market, because they are the ones looking at new trends and segments. Maybe they are trying to capitalize something you have neglected, so whether you have to double down over there, or it's okay, it's not a segment you want to attack. So keep constantly looking at that. The second one is, as you're growing and maturing, figure out how you want to have your next wave of growth, right? And this next wave of growth can be additional markets, new segments. It can be new products themselves, which are adjacent and you can sell them together. Whatever it is, like, these are the things that would help you. That next wave of growth will help you be less vulnerable to any new players who are coming back. Right? So I know this is more about sustaining in a crowded market, but I just wanted to kind of give those 2 pieces after we talk about